Hi everyone, my name is Tyler and I'm here to help you get into your new 40k army. 40k as a hobby can be very expensive to get into, but my goal with this series is to help you get a full army going without having to break the bank. Before we dive into the list, let's talk about some basic rules that we're going to be using for the list building process here. Our first goal is going to be to keep it affordable and utilize box deals. For everything that we're going to be looking at today, we're going to be looking at it from an MSRP value from Games Workshop themselves. Now, I don't recommend buying everything MSRP from Games Workshop. Often, local hobby stores, eBay, Amazon, things of that nature will have much better deals for the kits that I'm about to show you. Our second goal is that we're going to be making the list in steps, starting at 500 points and working our way up to 1,000 points, 1,500 points, and 2,000 points. Our third rule is we're going to be avoiding Forge World and Finecast. Many Forge World models are often very pricey for the points that they provide you on the table, and the resin used can be hard to work with, especially for beginners. As far as Finecast goes, I just don't think that they're quite as high quality as the plastic models that you can get otherwise. Our fourth goal is to aim to make lists with decent competitive viability. We're going to be trying to make lists that can do well at casual tournaments, in your games with friends, or maybe even get you some wins at major tournaments. Our fifth and final rule is the most important one. Just because I don't mention a model in my list, it doesn't mean that it isn't good. The most important thing that you can do is collect models that you think are cool. There's an entire side of the hobby that has nothing to do with playing, and if you don't like the models you're painting and building, you're not going to get the most out of this hobby. Today we're going to be talking about the Adeptus Custodes. The easiest way to think of the Custodes is to think of the most enhanced version of a Space Marine you can. They are faster, they are stronger, they are tougher, and they get their gene seed directly from the Emperor of Mankind. Custodes live their lives as the ultimate protectors of both the Emperor's Palace and the Golden Throne. Whereas Space Marine chapters are only allowed to have 1,000 soldiers at any given time, the Custodes are allowed to have 10,000 forces to protect the Golden Throne and the Emperor's will. These 10,000 soldiers will often take part in something called the Blood Games, where they will try to infiltrate the Imperial Palace to look for weak spots in their defenses and try to thwart assassination attempts before they can even come into fruition. The Custodes will often team up with the Sisters of Silence, an all-female force who are able to stave off demons and psychers simply by existing in the same room as one. This is very useful as Custodes themselves do not have any psychic powers, so they have no way of actually staving off these forces on their own. Now let's take a moment to talk about why you might want to get into a Custodes army. If you like saving money, you are going to love Custodes. They are the single most cost-efficient army in the game to purchase with an average of over 4 points per dollar. That means that on average, no matter what units you picked out of Custodes, you're probably spending less than $500 for an entire army. The army is also incredibly durable, with more wounds on their models than most other armies are going to have, an army-wide 2-up save, army-wide 4-up invuln saves, and a resistance to mortal wounds. They are a powerful melee army with easy access to fights first, letting them out-melee the other melee armies. If your friend is a World Eaters player who wants to run at you in Unga Bunga, you get to smack him down before he gets to start anything. Even with their very powerful melee, they are still a fairly respectable shooting army with lots of 2 damage weapons, mid-range AP, and some pretty powerful tanks. They are also the most elite of all non-knight armies. If you like the idea of having the best soldier on the battlefield, you want the Custodes. So, why would you not want to collect Custodes? Well, as it turns out, in my rules for list building, I lied to you all a little bit. There is one army in the game that does rely on Forge World models, and that is Custodes. They are the only army that will regularly need to pick up something from Forge World in order to compete at the top level. This is very unfortunate, and you can kind of work your way around it sometimes in certain metas, but just be aware that while you're saving lots of money on your regular units, you're going to be spending that money in Forge World instead, which is going to be a lot pricier. On top of that, individual models cost more in-game than some armies' entire units. If you look at a single custodian guard at 50 points, and then you look at an entire unit of Gretchen for 40 points, you can see how custodians are going to struggle a little bit on their secondary game. And if you really need to make that 200-point custodian guard unit sit on your home field objective, you're going to be feeling that loss of 200 points on the battlefield. With the recent change of devastating wounds no longer counting as mortal wounds and instead just bypassing saves and invuln saves, custodians can be very easily countered by armies that have a lot of access to devastating wounds. This is a bit of a problem because devastating wounds are a very, very meta powerful keyword. The other problem for custodians is that they can be picked off somewhat easily by a powerful shooting army. They have a lot of models with a lot of parts that might stick out a bit, or maybe have some longer bases, and if you're going up against something like a Tau or an Imperial Guard player, they might be able to get an angle and pick you off from across the table outside of your range. The Custodes army rule is Martial Kata. This really is the crux of what makes the Custodes such a powerful melee army. You get to pick between one of three stances depending on the situation that you're in and have your army be better in melee based on those scenarios. If you're about to get hit by a bunch of melee attacks from an army that melee hits you on 4s or 5s, maybe you take the defensive stance to subtract 1 from their hit rolls, making your army even harder to kill. Maybe you decide that you want sustained hits so that you can clean through hordes of Tyranids or Orcs or things like that. Or maybe you decide that you need to punch up into a vehicle or something with insanely high toughness and you just want lethal hits so that you can skip that wound phase entirely. There is so much flexibility in this army rule, and to me that is the most powerful thing about Custodes. When I look at a good army rule, I want to be able to have it match whatever scenario I'm in. The detachment rule for Custodes is Aegis of the Emperor. Custodes get a 4-up feel no pain against mortals. This was substantially more powerful before the previous balance slate came out and changed devastating wounds to no longer be mortal wounds, but it still has niche cases where it comes up, but honestly, their detachment rule is kind of useless right now against the majority of armies in the game. Now, for the first two lists that I'm going to be showing you today, they're both going to be starting off the same way. The third list is going to have quite a bit of deviation. For the first two lists, we're going to be starting off with one combat patrol of Adeptus Custodes, and that's it. This is going to give us well over 500 points and plenty of options to play with. Within this list, we're going to be taking one Shield Captain on Dawn Eagle Jetbike with a Salvo Launcher and the Veiled Blade. We're also going to be taking one 5-man Custodian Guard unit with 4 Guardian Spears and a Presidium Shield, and then we're also going to be taking 4 Prosecutors. The Prosecutors are our cheap backline holder unit, while the Custodian Guard are able to move up into the middle of the board and try to hold that center objective. The Shield Captain on Dawn Eagle Jetbike is going to be unsupported in terms of being attached to any units, but he's going to be able to fly around and do any kind of real damage that we need to with this army. At 1,000 points, it's going to be pretty simple. Again, we're just going to be picking up one Combat Patrol Custodes box, and that's going to be all that we're going to need for here. Now, when we look at how the 1,000 point list is going to shape out, we're still going to have the Jetbike Captain with the Veiled Blade, but this time he's going to have some Virtus Praetors to go along with Salvo Launchers. We're also going to be making a Shield Captain with Guardian Spear, who's going to be going into one of 2 4-man Custodian Guards with 3 Guardian Spears and a Presidium Shield. We're not going to be running any 5-mans because we want to make sure that we have Prosecutors to hold the backfield, but we also want to have Witch Seekers who can be that forward advancing scout unit that's going to be able to get onto objectives quickly so that our regular Custodian Guard are going to be able to have time to march up the battlefield. At 1,500 points, we are buying nothing. Absolutely nothing. We already have more than enough points to work with. What we are going to be doing is we're going to be making a second Shield Captain with the Guardian Spear and giving him Ceaseless Hunter so that he can go with the other Custodian Guard unit. Then we're going to be bringing in a second unit of Prosecutors to act as an additional objective holder, a second unit of Witch Seekers to act as pre-game moving objective holders, and a 3-man unit of Virtus Praetors for the Jetbike Captain to be able to pair along with so that the 2-man can go along and do whatever side objective stuff they need to do. Now, at 2,000 points, you could go and pick up a third combat patrol of Custodes, and that would give you around 2,500 points of Custodes that you could play around with. As long as you like bikes, that's not too bad. The problem is that right now, the bikes really are not that good, and we're kind of running them begrudgingly almost. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to be picking up 2 boxes of Alaris Custodians so that we can have some Terminator units in our army. This way, if the combat patrol winds up being a good deal for you in the future, you can go pick up a third one if you want, but we're going to be able to have a more diverse selection of units. Now, in order to make this 2,000 points work, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making another jet bike captain with salvo launcher. We're going to be making the Alaris captain with a guardian spear. We're going to be making it so that we have 2 separate 2-man units of Virtus Praetors, and we're going to be making the Alaris custodians all have guardian spears. The second style of Custodes list that I'm going to have for you today is only going to be using 1 combat patrol. It's also going to have a much heavier focus on Witch Seekers and Sisters of Silence in general. What we're going to be doing in order to accomplish this is we're going to be picking up 1 Rhino, 1 Trajan Valoris, and 1 additional Sisters of Silence box. In this list, Trajan Valoris is going to do Trajan Valoris things, and he's going to be going with your Custodian Guard. The Jet Bike Captain is going with the Virtus Praetors. The Prosecutors are holding backfield objectives. But the big thing is the Anathema Psychona Rhino with Hunter Killer Missile is going to be able to take either 1 or both units of the Witch Seekers and be able to really protect them as they move up the field. This is going to give you a surprising amount of durability with mobility early on, as the Rhino is going to be able to keep all of the Witch Seekers safe, and based on what I was able to find, the Witch Seekers inside of the Psychona Rhino will give the Psychona Rhino the ability to pre-game move. At 1,500 points, we're just going to be picking up 2 boxes of Alaris Custodians, and that's really all we're going to need for this section. We really need these Alaris Custodians because we are lacking a severe amount of firepower with this army right now. The Alaris Custodians are going to kind of fill that gap for us by having the Alaris Captain with the Guardian Spear and Inspirational Exemplar going along with the Alaris Custodians and being able to really punch into those big meaty targets for us. At 2,000 points, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be picking up 2 more boxes of Alaris Custodians. But we're also going to dip into the Imperium as a whole and pick up 1 Calidus Assassin. Now, the 2 boxes of Alaris Custodians aren't going to be made into a 5-man with a second captain. Instead, we're going to be making a 3-man Custodian Alaris unit and a 2-man Alaris Custodian unit. These are going to be able to deep strike into different parts of the backfield in order to do objectives for you, such as potentially behind enemy lines or trying to investigate signals. We're going to be having the 2-man Alaris Custodian unit because we want to be able to save points for the Calidus Assassin, who will be able to forward deploy, has lone op to be a very annoying unit to deal with, but can also mid-game redeploy herself to be able to bounce around to all of those spots that you really need. But let's say that you're the type of player who doesn't like the Sisters of Silence, you think that they're lame, and you don't want bikes because you think bikes are bad. Well, what we're going to do for you then is we're going to be picking up 1 Trajan Valoris, 1 Custodian Guard unit, and 1 Calidus Assassin. This list is going to be pretty self-explanatory. The Custodian Guards are going to have Guardian Spears, Presidium Shields, and a Trajan Valoris, and then the Calidus Assassin is just going to be on her own, being lone op and being annoying. You don't really have anything to hold a backfield objective with this, as I do think that your army does want some Sisters of Silence in it just to be able to enable the rest of your army even better while making sure you're able to score primary. But if you really don't want any of those models, this is kind of the best way to move in that direction. Now, moving this list up to 1,000 points, we're going to be picking up 1 box of Alaris Custodians, and we're going to be picking up 1 box of Custodian Wardens. The Custodian Wardens overall are a little bit better at holding Trajan Valoris, as they're able to reduce the chance to be wounded as long as they have a character in their unit. The Custodian Guards are a bit more of the offensive choice if you really decide that you want that, but you do have some flexibility here to pick between the 2 of them depending on what you want. The Alaris Custodians are all going to be in 1 unit with their Guardian Spears, able to deep strike and do whatever they want. Now, as we move into 1500 points, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be picking up one Blade Champion, and we're going to be picking up one additional box of Custodian Wardens. Because the Blade Champion is such a more aggressive choice for a character leader, we're going to be giving him the Veiled Blade and sending him with the Custodian Guards with their Guardian Spears, Presidium Shield, and a Vexilla so that he can get the extra rerolls, as well as just be able to have that good supporting unit with him. Trajan Valoris and the Shield Captain with Guardian Spear and Inspirational Exemplar can either go with the 5-man Custodian Wardens or the 4-man Custodian Wardens, just depends on what you're feeling like for that particular game. The decision doesn't make that huge of a difference. The biggest thing is just making sure that all 3 of these units are going to be able to have supporting characters, so we want to make sure that the 5th Custodian Warden is turned into that Shield Captain. As we round the list out at 2,000 points, we're going to be picking up 2 more boxes of Custodian Guard, and that's really going to round everything out for us. The only change that you're really going to see here at this point is you're going to be seeing 3 5-man units of Custodian Guards with Guardian Spears, 1 Presidium Shield, and a Vexilla. Nothing else is really changing here. You can move the characters around in whatever way that you want. But one thing that I do want to mention about this list is that I think that it will suffer a little bit due to its lack of having Sisters of Silence. If you are okay with picking up 1 box of Sisters of Silence, even though it is extremely cost inefficient, you'll have a substantially stronger army by being able to have 1 Prosecutor unit instead of a 5th Custodian Guard in one of these squads. It's still going to keep your price well under $600, but just be aware that the Sisters of Silence, picking them up on their own, is the most expensive part of this army. And those are the 3 main Custodes lists that I have for you today. Now, when we look at the tiering for Custodes, they're going to easily slot into that less than $600 tier. I was actually able to put together a Custodes army for only $380 using 1 box of Alaris Terminators and 2 boxes of the Combat Patrol. The problem with that list is that it required using a lot of units that were just simply not worth it, and it would make your army too weak for me to be able to bring it forward in good faith and say, hey, you should build this as your army. But that's everything that I have for you today. If you are looking to get into 40k for as cheap as possible, Custodes are the #1 route that will always be suggested to you. If you're able to get sales discounts on anything here, you could potentially get your army in for close to $300, which is just ludicrous when we look at the cost of some of the other armies that we've looked at so far in this series. Thank you for watching, and make sure to keep an eye out for the community polls where we decide which faction will be voted on next. And have a great rest of your day.